Passage Matthew 28, and this is after Jesus has been crucified and buried. It says, starting in verse 1, after the Sabbath, at dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. There was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven, and going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. The angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you're looking for Jesus, who was crucified. He is not here. He has risen, just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, he is risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Now I have told you." So the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid yet filled with joy, and ran to tell the disciples. Suddenly Jesus met them. "Greetings," he said. They came to him and clasped his feet and worshipped him. And Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me." While the women were on their way, some of the guards went into the city and reported to the chief priests everything that had happened. When the chief priests had met with the elders and devised a plan, they gave the soldiers a large sum of money, telling them, "You are to say, his disciples came at night and stole them away while we were asleep. If this report gets to the governor, we will satisfy him and keep you out of trouble." So the soldiers took the money and did as they were instructed, and this story has been widely circulated among the Jews to this very day. Then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus told them to go, and when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. Then Jesus came to them and said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age."
The apex of human experience conceived in a virgin womb. Heaven's perfection breathes his first in a barn. The fullness of God beats in the heart of a helpless infant. This is the genius of his birth. The requirements of the law outmatched by the righteousness of God. Sovereign simplicity confounds the wisdom of this world. Relentless mercy humbles the proud and heals the broken. This is the genius of his life. The light of the world, wrapped in our darkness. Freedom and strength bound in our weakness. The peacemaker pierced, the creator destroyed, the power to save spent not for himself. This is the genius of his cross. Death's signature victory stripped by love's ultimate triumph. Hell's finest hour eclipsed by the dawning of grace. Limitless hope lives again in all who believe. This is the genius of resurrection. The Lamb slain so that man no more may die. The suffering servant before whom all will bow. His finished work is the fountain of all new beginnings. This is the way. This is the truth. This is the life. This is the genius of Jesus.
Good morning. Happy Easter. Really glad we could be with you this morning, if not in person, then via videotape. And we're hoping today that you'll enjoy our message as we share the Easter Sunday message. Ego eimi is actually, it's one of those few passages in the scriptures where the different languages really don't give it justice. Like if you translate the Greek ego eimi into English, it just sounds like I am. And the significance of it is lost. Ego eimi was the name of God that the Hebrews used in to translate that name into Greek. They used ego eimi, which means I am. Now it's an I am with an emphasis. And so it doesn't just mean I, it means I am. And they use that for the actual very name of God. In the Hebrew, it was Yahweh. We put the vowels in. There's normally just consonants there. But we put those vowels in there so that we can say the word. But in Hebrew, it was quite literally, which is the sound of breathing, really, when you think about it. So ego and me. And so Jesus, when he said an I am statement, including this one, I am the resurrection and life, many of the instances he uses ego and me, which means I am. Quite literally, he was saying, I, the Lord, am the resurrection and the life. These I am statements, they really form the foundation of the relevance of Christ's audacious claims. Think about the things Jesus claimed to be: the way, the truth, and the life, the resurrection and the life, the door, the bread of life, the light of the world, all these kind of things. It would be absolutely foolhardy for you or I to claim those things. The only person who could, with context, claim them would be God himself. And so Jesus uses these statements, which really smashes the idea of Jesus just being an ordinary teacher. It was the Hebrews' rendering of God's name. There's a power in Jesus' claims as well, because it tended to be he said, I am, and then he demonstrated it. In the passage where he said, I am the resurrection and the life, this preceded him actually raising his friend Lazarus from the dead. So not only could he say it, he was able to follow through with it. And so Jesus's claims to deity normally were accompanied by actions that demonstrated that he was indeed who he said he was. It really puts a period on Jesus's claim to be the divine. And so every time you see this passage, in particular at Easter, it's important for us to know this. The reason Jesus got victory or had victory over death was because he was in nature very God himself. And being resurrected from the dead, he overcame death so that you and I can. So what do we do in light of this? The first thing we can take from this I am the resurrection and life statement is an invitation for us to relinquish control to God for the problems that only God can resolve. Leon Morris wrote in The Atonement, the cross is a denial that self-assertiveness can ever be a satisfying way. See, Easter isn't just a statement that God loves us, but also one where he entrusts us with the place of humanity to respond. You see, there's a certain amount of, or a certain number of problems that we encounter in life, this pandemic being one of them, that are absolutely overwhelming. The scope and the breadth of the problem is way too much for people to be able to respond to. And even collectively, it's something that can be overwhelming. And we as individuals go through those kind of challenges. We do as families and churches and things like that. And it tends to be at the time of greatest crisis, we try to take the most control. I think that, the binge shopping and things that we see many people doing, in some ways it's prudent, but some people have gone so overboard because they're trying to get some sense of control over the narrative or the reality of what's happening to them. It's a panic move, but it also gives us a sense of power. And here's the truth of the matter is a lot of the overwhelming things that we're confronted with are quite literally too much for us to take on. We need help. And Easter is God's way of showing us that the greatest problems, the deepest, darkest needs we have are addressed by God and through God and in God, and we can trust him with it. There's a relinquishing of control. There are a lot of things I can control. I can wash my hands or not go out or do those kind of things, and that's great. God's not going to do that for me. A lot of things I can do, and God's not going to see through to do with me, but many things that I can't do, including sometimes being overwhelmed with worry, depression, or fear. I can't overcome that myself. I need help. And God's promise through Easter is that he is enough. He can provide us victory over those overwhelming problems, the problems that we can't solve in our own strength. The second Easter morning thing that we can do is take an account of our lives as we know the truth about its brevity. We are only here for a short time. Easter ensures we go on. It empowers us to not just live for this world, but to live for the next. I've got some great quotes. I'm going to read them off to you here that really apply to this. John Donne wrote, one small short step past, we wake eternally, and death shall be no more. Death, though, shall die. Paul Ricoeur writes, if the resurrection is resurrection from the dead, all hope and freedom are in spite of death. And N.T. Wright, one of my favorite authors, writes, when Jesus rose again, God's whole creation emerged from the tomb, introducing a world full of new potential and possibility. We are only here for a short time, yet Easter gives us the ability and the power to live victorious lives here. Why? Because our lives are just a cover of a book that is going to go on and on and on, as C.S. Lewis said. He also gives us victory in the life we have now. Though our lives are brief, they can be victorious, meaningful lives. Lives where we can confront suffering, where we can make change, where we can allow God to work on our hearts, we can worship. There's so many things that we can do in this life, that your life dedicated to Jesus is not a loss. It is the absolute highest purpose a human being. This is a true story. There was a man born in 1725. And he grew up in a horrific situation and ended up being probably one of the most vile men that ever lived. His ability to blaspheme was legendary. He worked on a ship, and the captain there said not only did he use the worst language he had ever heard, he created new words that exceeded the limits of verbal debauchery. This man was so hated by the other sailors that there was one time he got drunk and he fell overboard. And instead of rescuing him, they tried throwing harpoons at him because he was so hated by those people. He was unruly and he was disobedient to the captain, and he was hated, and he worked on a slave ship. And one of the things that he did, that he used to do, that he loved doing, was flogging slaves. And accounts give up to 350 lives were lost because of this man, probably one of the vilest men that ever lived. His captain at times ended up flogging him himself because he was so disrespectful and he was such a horrible man. So at one point, he decided and he settled down on this thought that he was going to kill his captain. And so he began to plot and make a decision. And his decision was, he was going to kill his captain, and then he was going to kill himself. That's how twisted he was. But they got in this big storm on the ship. And that storm raged and raged. And his friend, the only friend he had, was washed overboard and lost. When he saw that happen, he fell down and said, Lord, have mercy on me. John started reading his Bible. And soon a great change took place in him. And he started to learn what it meant to love God. And this horrible, vile man was transformed into the writer of the hymn, the most famous hymn ever written, called Amazing Grace. It was this man that wrote, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see. Another verse goes, 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear, the hour I first believed. The third thing we can do is what I call living like Easter people, by expressing, doing, and reflecting the person of the resurrected Christ. Now you may ask, okay, what is an Easter person? Is a person sticks a bunny tail on them and hops around, distributing chocolate eggs? Isn't quite what I meant. Easter people are people that, because they recognize the significance of Easter, they live with a sense of joy, purpose, and passion that is contagious. There's a real expression of God's love to the world that's expressed in Easter, and it's something you can't shut up about. It's something that you can't help but pass on to people. I always talk or think about the idea of you being able to go in a room and light things up, and by that what I mean is to lift or redeem things. A Christ follower is redeemed by Christ, and so he takes us and he transforms us. to the extent that some of us is like John Newton. And this new life that we express as grace and mercy and passion of Christ, it has an impact on people around us. It quite literally gives us a chance to make history by showing people's God's love, by serving them, by supporting them, by encouraging them, by challenging them, and by introducing them to Christ through your actions and your words. Quite literally, it brings light into dark places. And that's what it means to live like Easter people. Carl Jung wrote, "What happens after death is so unspeakably glorious that our imaginations and our feelings do not suffice to form even an approximate conception of it." Jesus' words to Mary were, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die." Jesus' questions to her at the end of that statement was, do you believe this? Do you believe this? And that's our challenge today. We can talk about logically the proofs of the resurrection happened. We can talk about the historical effect of it. We can talk about the early church. We can talk about all those things, and it's good that we do. It's good to address questions of the mind. But the question of the heart is, do you believe in this? And by that, what Jesus was saying is, in your heart, Mary, deep down, do you trust me enough to turn over all the anxiety, all the fear, all the grief over to me? And that's a question Christ asked of us today. Are you tired of doing it yourself? Do you find your burden too much to bear? Well, good news. God is here to bear it for you. And as we look around at the world, panicking in fear and the unknown, we are the people who can stand up and say, we have been given the Easter message, and we can be light and salt and love to our world. We can stand fast while our neighbors panic. We can introduce them to love. We can give when everybody's trying to hoard. We can be people that express Jesus' love. Why? Because we live for way bigger things than what a pandemic can affect. We live for bigger things. So happy Easter. I'm glad you've been with us today. Thank you, and God bless.
We all have times when hope seems lost. When we run from our past, regrets, failures, mistakes, sins. When we feel forgotten. When God seems silent. But hope can be found in the 3 days that changed the world. It's only the beginning.
Hello, church. Thank you for being with us. I hope these videos are helping maintain some spiritual inspiration in your lives, and I hope they're getting through to you. It seems like a lot of you are watching them, and I'm getting some great feedback. So I'm hoping we continue to encourage you. It's Easter, and during Easter, we have a lot of exciting things happen in the church, normally in person, but right now as we do things online, I don't want this holiday to be diminished in any way. And so I just invite you to a few things. One is as a family, have communion over the weekend. Take some grape juice and some bread. And if you turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 11, there's some verses in there that talk about what Jesus did or what he said. Or you can go in the later books of the Gospels into the book of Matthew and read the account of Jesus and the Lord's Supper. And quite literally what you do is you say, let's take these emblems. You take the body first, and you think about, Christ giving his body broken for you, and then the blood that was shed to cover your sin. And then you just take a time for a short bit of prayer. It's not a complicated thing, but I encourage you to do it. Also want to thank you. We've got many things coming up. We're learning to use new programs that are going to help us connect as a leadership and with our small groups and things like that. So stay tuned. We are not diminished in any way. And we love you, and we pray for you each day by name. And if you need anything, let us know. God bless.